Welcome to Erase from History. This is a new idea for a series I'm going to do on this channel in which I'm going to take two movies and compare them to each other, and in the end, as the title suggests, I'm going to decide which one that I would erase from history if I absolutely had to make the choice. As of right now, there are a couple of rules to this series. For one thing, I'm never going to take the same movie twice and compare it to another movie, just because I feel like that would get way too repetitive. And for another thing, I'm really not trying to be an asshole, but I am not going to take recommendations. Like, let's say someone tells me to decide between Disney's Hercules and Aladdin. I would get rid of Hercules without question, but maybe someone else would have a different opinion, and that's fine, we're all different. I'm going to take two films that I find personally to be comparable in terms of quality, and for this first episode I'm going with a couple of heavy hitters, two films which I find to be the greatest films of all time. It's a Wonderful Life and The Shawshank Redemption. Aside from my own personal opinion on these films, a couple of other things that they have in common are that they're both essentially tall tales which give the audience a message about never giving up on life. And coincidentally, each of these films failed at the box office when they came out, and it wasn't until later on that they became widely recognized as masterpieces. Now, for those of you who don't know, It's a Wonderful Life is the story of a man who has done everything to help the people in his town. One night, things end up going so horribly awry for him that he ultimately takes everything in his life for granted and wishes that he was never born. And so he gets to see how things would be if he was never born. The Shawshank Redemption is about a man who ends up going to one of the most brutal prisons in the entire country for a murder that he never committed. While he's in there, he does everything in his power to make institutional life less horrible for himself and his fellow inmates, never accepting this as just the norm. Everyone there finds that he's full of surprises, and his best surprise is yet to come. So looking at the biggest positives of It's a Wonderful Life, first of all, when I was going into this movie for the first time, I actually didn't know that the whole storyline of the main character finding out what it would be like if he was never born didn't take place until the last 20 or 25 minutes of the movie. And the drama which takes place before that is genuinely riveting. I mean, they set up the characters so well that in the end, I wanted to see him get the girl. I wanted to see him beat the evil Mr. Potter, and during the climax, I didn't want to see him give up hope. Another big positive is the casting of Jimmy Stewart in the lead role. I mean, a lot of people make fun of him, but you have to admit that he became a success for a reason. Seeing him in this movie, he is so charming and likable that you just instantly connect with his character. Finally, I would say that one of the most misguided criticisms for It's a Wonderful Life is that when it first came out, people were complaining about how depressing it was, but when you look at it, despite the heavy drama that takes place, and despite the tearjerker of an ending, there's actually a lot of comedy in this film. There are several funny moments in it that keep it from being a completely joyless experience. Now, moving on to The Shawshank Redemption, I know I'm going to sound repetitive as hell for this, but it has a genuinely riveting storyline. I mean, at the beginning, you don't know much about Andy Dufresne, but there is a point where it perfectly puts you on his character's side, where he does something completely selfless for his fellow inmates while they're working on a rooftop. And the more the film goes on after that, the more you just want to see this guy succeed at everything that he does. You want to make a bigger library, Andy? Go ahead. And at the risk of continuing to sound repetitive, another great thing about this movie, which people tend to make fun of nowadays, is Morgan Freeman's narration style. I mean, the man just lends such a charm and credibility to the story with the way that he explains things, and the soothing tone of his voice there's something magical about it that's kind of hard to explain. And then finally, there's the finale. I'm not going to give away any spoilers for those of you who haven't seen The Shawshank Redemption, but let's just say it has possibly the most cathartic ending that you will ever see in a movie. Now let's move on to the flaws of these movies. Granted, I am going to be getting very nitpicky in this section, but every true movie lover acknowledges that no film is absolutely perfect, and even these masterpieces have a couple of flaws in them. In the case of It's a Wonderful Life, I have to admit that it starts off just a tiny bit rocky when they give you the visuals for God and His Angels. I admit that it's unique, but the special effects are very dated and honestly kind of lame. They could have gone with something more interesting to look at. But then who knows, maybe since I'm non-religious, maybe I'm the only one seeing the blinking lights and the true believers out there are seeing something amazing. For another thing, it gets pretty silly during the whole "Wish I Was Never Born" segment when George finds out that his wife never married and it's shockingly revealed that she works as a librarian. Oh no, a woman who works with books. Pretty soon she'll start speaking her mind and voting. We can't allow this vagina menace to take over the world. And then there's the matter of Mr. Potter. I mean, don't get me wrong, he is an excellent villain and he does a top-notch job at getting the audience to absolutely loathe him, but the way that he ends up by the time the movie's over is absolutely underwhelming. I mean, for you know-it-alls out there, I'm aware that there was a scene they deleted from this movie where you got to see his fortunate demise. Yes, I said fortunate, but if it didn't end up in the final cut, then it never happened. In the case of The Shawshank Redemption, my first flaw with this movie is possibly the most nitpicky out of the three, but I noticed that there aren't a whole lot of bad guys at Shawshank. Granted, there are villains in the movie. The people running the place are extremely evil, and you also have the sodomites who give the main character a hard time, but overall there just aren't that many, bad people running around the place. Granted, believe it or not, I'm aware that not everyone who goes to prison is necessarily a bad guy and that they're all human beings, but I have a hard time believing that prison would be this nice. Also, the main prison guard at Shawshank, played by Clancy Brown, is just so over the top in how evil he is that it's kind of hard to buy him as a character. Granted, the actor went up to the director and brought this up, and the director told him that, since this is from one of the inmates' point of view, he isn't going to paint that guard in a flattering light. But there are just so many weird moments, like when he beats a man to death for crying, that even Cruella de Vil would be like, "Damn, this guy needs to calm his ass down." And that is why I don't do impressions for a living. And once again, my final thing on The Shawshank Redemption is in regards to its final act. Once again, no spoilers here, but at the end of this movie, the main character, Andy, goes through something which no human being would have been able to survive. I mean, just given what he would have been breathing in and all of the dehydration from vomiting, there's just no way. I mean, I'll believe that the guy is super intelligent and super persistent, but he's not superhuman. In the end, if I absolutely had to choose which one of these two movies to erase from history, including all of my memories of it, I would get rid of It's a Wonderful Life. I mean, we would be losing a huge icon of cinema, and I would be hard-pressed to think of a better movie to watch around Christmas time, but as investing and entertaining as that movie is, it's still not as impactful, suspenseful, and intelligent as The Shawshank Redemption. And those are my final thoughts. I hope you all liked this video. Let me know which one of these two movies you prefer over the other, and until next time, I hope you all have a good one.